Welcome to the Inspiring Leadership Podcast, where we seek to elevate your leadership and transform your workplace. My name is Dominic Seal. I'm delighted to be the host of this show. With my team at EQ Strategist, we seek to bring you a dose of healthy inspiration and practical insights into how to enhance team performance, cultivate resilience, foster collaboration, and shape culture. I had the most amazing time doing this next episode with the wonderful Andrew Davey. He's one of my coaches and friends, someone that I consider to be an exceptional coach and even more extraordinary friend and human being. As a coach, you need to be an effective influencer. You literally very often have seconds to build rapport. Andy is one of those that can build rapport with literally people from all walks of life, different age groups. I've seen him influence and inspire people from teenagers all the way to C-suite level in organizations across the planet. And that takes a special gift. I hope you watch this episode and listen to it through the lens of what makes someone an effective influencer. We talk about a range of topics, including being purpose-led, how to find and identify and be authentic with your core values, and also we speak about legacy and how you most like to be remembered. I know you'll take a lot out of this. If your mission is to be the most effective influencer you can be, please enjoy the authentic and inspiring Andrew Davey. Thank you, Andy, for bringing us here today and being our guest for our next episode of Inspiring Leadership, where we look to feature amazing leaders and help other people model the traits, the mindset. And it's been about 6 years, Andy, since we did our
six
years. I just look back.
Have I changed?
20. Have you changed? Not a single bit in terms of the way you look, your energy, and everything that you do. But certainly things have changed in the last 6 years since we had our video cast, where I got to interview you and really enjoyed that experience. A little bit nervous today. We are in this amazing environment, and I have you to thank for bringing us here, Andy, and doing our first in-person podcast. I'm super excited about this and what will unfold. And yet, lots of things have changed since the last time. We've had a pandemic. It's affected each and every one of us. We've had to adapt and pivot. And yet all through it, you, my friend, have shown through, each and every time with positivity. Every time we have a workshop to run as a coach, as a transformer, you've always hit it out of the park. You've just showed up with your best energy. So I think I was really curious about wanting to interview you again, Andy, to learn about your experiences and what shapes you to be the wonderful coach and leader that you are, knowing that our audience will get a lot out of it. So thank you first and foremost.
You're very welcome.
Great to do this with me today, my dear friend.
Thanks for the opportunity as always, Dom. It's funny, I've been so busy, I have not even had time to think about this until I sit on this chair. So I'm as equally interested to see what comes out of this conversation as well. So always wonderful, these moments that you take, we never do, to stop and, maybe reflect, reinforce, this is who I am today. You say 6 years, a lot has happened in 6 years. There's been a bunch of things. The pandemic, you mentioned, all of those things. Maybe not changed, but I know I've definitely grown, and I know
Absolutely.
I've definitely evolved through some of what would be some of my not finest moments, some of the challenges that we face. As a normal human being, it was pretty tough going through it. Here we are, 6 years on, so
Absolutely.
let's see where we go with this, Dom.
Thanks, Andy. And very often, when we are in our workshops and people look at us and we're always beaming and happy and positive, and I think everyone can sometimes get into the trap of thinking that, boy, these people's lives are so amazing, and yet we all are human beings. We all go through our ups and downs in life, just as everyone does. But before we jump too far ahead of ourselves, Andy, knowing that some of our audience, it would be the very first time they're actually learning a little bit about you, would it be okay if you gave everyone here maybe a 5-minute backstory of who's Andrew Davey?
Sure. Where do you start with that, Dom? If I think about it, the amount of people that will say to me, how did you end up doing what you're doing today? It seems like a very jaggedy path. It's almost like you've been off course and come back on. And for me, it's very deliberate. I look at it and I think there's no other way this could have panned out the way it did. I'm a true believer life leaves you clues. And it's only when you're at a place, like you say, 6 years on, here we are now, in 2025, and I look back through life and I see very deliberate moments of things that have shaped us to be on the trajectory we are. So if we look at coaching's always been a part of my life. I think back to, even school, primary school for that matter. I was elected as a student counsellor, right? And the amount of times I have people come up to me and say, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I haven't shared this with anyone, that type of stuff that would happen, right? And I went off the path of going to, high school thereafter, and, I knew that wasn't for me. Left school quite early. I finished up in Australia, in Perth, Western Australia, where I'm from. I finished up, I was midway through year 11. So my Singaporean friends, that's secondary 4, right? So from that point, I knew that education at that moment in time was not the path that I was willing to take. And I always look at people showing up in your world, just as you did in mine. And I was 16 years old at the time, and I had what I would call one of my very first mentors show up. This is a guy that was very successful in business, I later learned. This was a guy that's very famous in Perth, Western Australia. You would see him in all the commercials and things. His name was Jeff Moritz. He owns a company called Jeff Moritz Gas and Air. I was with a group of friends, bearing in mind an apprentice mechanic earning about $167.70 a week at the time. Really just thought about fun, really thought about getting my driver's license, really thought about, all the things that, that made fun, life fun at that age, right? And I was with a group of friends. We were sitting down in a resort, and it was a big spa bath, and there was a group of us sitting there. I looked across, and there was one guy who wasn't part of our group, and it was Jeff Moritz. Wow. Didn't know him from a bar of soap. And he sits and looks at us, and he starts asking us all these questions. He said, what do you want to be, when you grow up? And I thought, well, I'm a mechanic, right? That's what I'm already doing it. And he starts asking questions. He says, how much do you think you're going to be making 10 years from now? Mm-hmm. A kid that's making $167.70 a week, it's not really questions or things you think of, come from a typical middle-class upbringing. He started asking all these questions. And I remember at the end of it, in this group of us, we all felt like shit. We all walked away thinking like, geez, this guy's, there he is with his boat and his four-wheel drive, and he's questioning us, where we're saving up for our first car. And we've been asked these questions. And when I say feel like shit, it's almost that I've never been questioned like that before. But he left one passing comment. He said, do yourself a favor, go read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Wow.
And I hated reading. I hated books. I left school early. But there was something in that moment I knew I had to read that book. And I picked up that book and literally changed the trajectory of my life. This guy inserted himself in my world as a character and gave me this piece of advice. I read that book, and it was 2 months later, on literally a little bit of savings and stuff, I managed to buy my first property at 17.
Wow.
And that gave me options when I was older. It gave me options to start my own business as a mechanic. It gave me options later in life because it gave me a purpose and an opportunity to see something greater than what I could see for myself. And I truly believe he saw something in us that we didn't see in ourselves, and lit up a light, a torch, if you will, for us to take and run with. So that advice, read that book, read that information, read the stories that were in that pages that existed. And that sent me on a trajectory of personal development, Tony Robbins events, these types of things, to realize that it's not actually about money, it's about what you can do with your life and the purpose that you can create for others.
Wow.
So the mechanical business, I remember I got to the point where I hated the actual fixing of cars, but I loved people. And, I'd even be having moments, where I would be invited to people's homes for their kids' birthdays. I was the mechanic fixing the car, right? I'd have moments where, people would confide in you when you're fixing the car because you built so much trust and you built these relationships with people. People would be sharing what they were going through. It was really amazing. So when I exited that business, I sold it, I just knew what I wanted to do was go and help people. I didn't know how the hell I was going to do it.
Wow.
But here we are today.
Good idea, mate.
How's that for 5 minutes?
What a great story, Andy. Well, firstly, so many things to take away from that. I think a wonderful mentor who cared enough to come and speak to a group of boys at that time, and And yet for you to take that on and act on it, to read that book, and again, to read and to know and not to do is not to know. One of the things that we've learned in our journey. And yet you exemplify the doing, always with that commitment to see how far you can go to be even better. And it's one of the things that really drew you into our lives. I still remember that time when we met at Magic Moments, where you were contributing and inspiring the wonderful youth at that Youth Leadership and Business Summit. And we fell in love with you and the values that you had, and stayed in touch ever since. But just to learn that you are one of those people. One of the things that strikes me always about you, Andy, is you have that goal, you trust in yourself, you go for it, you're always very clear about your why. Yeah, and trusting your heart. And in the last few years, things has been challenging. It's affected our business. It's affected. We've dealt with loss in our lives. I know that COVID was particularly tough, not just on business but also on Jeannie's business. And you guys was absolutely committed to have your beautiful child. Hudson is now in your life, making that big pivot, move to the US, complete your executive MBA, and when moving to the to the US also, you've always seemed to not take the easy path, Andy. Like many people would have said, hey, I know you've got 3 chocolate Labradors, and for many they would have said, well, we'll move to the US but leave the Labradors and find them a new home. You took them with you. And that would have gone through great expense, great sacrifice. And yet you did that, and that was inspiring. And then you went there, and after 2 years doing what you guys felt was right and bringing up a beautiful child, making another big move, relocating back here, and again relocating the 3 Labradors, and looking at how you've managed that process, having someone, the whole process was, for most people, they would have really just drowned under pressure. And yet you've been just that model of resilience and positivity. And as I shared, we see the Andy, and one of the privileges we have is to see and understand, and you allowing that intimate look into your life. And yet, whenever you're in front of coaches and participants, you always bring your A game. And they always say, right, the best of the best are distinguished not by what they do in moments of comfort, but what they do in moments of challenge and adversity. What do you draw on to help you with your decision making during those most challenging moments, Andy? When most people would have chosen the easier path, you seem to always choose the more difficult path from other people's eyes anyway. What is it that holds you?
That's a great question. I would say that I don't choose the difficult path, but the path chooses me.
Wow.
And I think if I look at it from the perspective where, if I knew that this is the journey we had to go through in the past few years, as an example, and it's a really challenging time. The move back to Singapore was earlier than planned. And if I look at all of that, the path chose us. And if I say the path chose us, those difficulties, I can use that as an excuse as to why I have the haircut I have today. There's been some very stressful moments, but it's that you choose growth. If you choose growth, the path becomes very obvious, and you have to step on that path. When I was a kid, I was probably 12 years old when I started racing motocross. So, off-road dirt bikes. I've played with motorbikes since I was a child.
Wow.
Loved the sport. I love everything about it. And one of the things that's most enjoyable about the sport is that it's not a smooth path. And that's the whole point. It'd be very boring if it was. And you always look back in hindsight on the other side of any challenge or anything that you've gone through. And you sometimes look and think to yourself, I don't even know how I got through that. Or, you look up and talk to whoever, you want to label as the creator. And say, I don't think I'm ready for this. And the thing is, you clearly were. You clearly always were. You just didn't know it. So it's not a deliberate choice. It's always, you talk about values, it's always a values-based decision. You always have that choice, in doing the right thing or doing things right. And I think that's my north pointing compass always. I have a very simple philosophy, Dom, very simple philosophy, and that's to be a good human. And I do that in big actions, small actions. I just do it in my everyday behaviors. If I use an example, I was just at the gym this morning, right? I get out of the car and I look on the ground. I mean, we're here living in Singapore, so it's a pretty clean place, right? But on occasion it does happen. I open the door and there's a Coke can with a straw in it right near my car door. I have a choice in this moment. Be a good human. What's a good human do in this moment? Pick up the can, you put it in the bin. That's what I did. And I don't do it because there's cameras watching. I don't do it for cred. I don't do it to tell you on this podcast. I do it because that's what I always do. And I think back through life, there's so many times we have a choice, and the choice can send you in either of those two paths, doing the right thing or doing things right. And when we're clear on values, we become consciously aware of the choice that we make. Mm-hmm. We talk about the mechanic business. That's probably a greatest example. It's a thought that comes to mind, so there might be value in sharing this with someone. I remember maybe 2 years into that business, still as you're starting out, I was completely clueless. I was literally a buffoon when it came to business. I had no idea what I was doing. I was innocent and naive enough to think I've got this skill of fixing cars and maybe I could start my own business and turn that into a business. And that was back in a time when the mobile mechanic industry didn't really exist. I think it was 2003 when I started that business. And I was 2 years in, you're like, every job was a bonus. You're only as good as the last car you serviced, right? Because, my expenses were minimal, but also, the income coming in wasn't fantastic. We're talking old school, where you would put flyers in letterboxes. That's how hungry I was to get this business to succeed. I remember one day, and I remember the lady's name was Phyllis. It stayed with me and it's just popped up, so let's share it. Phyllis was an old lady. She was in her 80s and she had a car that was in pristine condition, but it was probably 10 plus years old. And she called me up to do a service on this car. And I arrived at the car and I looked over it and I realized that this thing had traveled about 1,000 kilometers in 10 years. And I realized that there was actually nothing I could do to this car. I had a choice. I could have made a job out of it. Do I need the invoice? Absolutely. I'm starting a business. I'm trying to get ahead. But I've been left with this choice. What it really was, now I look back, it's values at play. So I made the choice to say, and to knock on the door and to tell her, you know what? I actually looked over your car. I pumped the tires up for you. I checked everything out. I checked all the levels and everything. Your car's perfect. And it looks like you obviously don't do a lot of mileage, right? So she said, yeah, I drive down to the shops once a week. Where's the shops? It's 30 seconds from the house. That's all she did. She just used it for this commute. Wow. So I said, look, I'm not going to charge you anything, but you have my number. If you ever need anything, let me know. I knew that, doing tire pressures and things is something that's probably going to be a bit challenging for an 80-plus-year-old. So I did it with the intent of doing the right thing, being a good human. That's what good humans do. Resting my head on the pillow, knowing that, I didn't take an old lady's money that shouldn't have been parted with, if that makes sense. It was probably 1 week after that, I get a call from a guy that said, you serviced my mother's car just last week. You came over and checked it out. And he explained who it was. I said, oh, yeah, I recall. He said, you know what? You restored my faith in humanity.
Wow.
So this was the son of the mother whose car I looked at.
Wow.
It turns out this guy owned a building and construction firm in Perth, Western Australia. He said, you know what? I'm going to give you the entire fleet of my vehicles to service because of what you did. I look at that, right? I had the choice. I could have taken $150. What came of that was a huge opportunity because I did the right thing.
Wow.
Be a good human. So that's my advice. And having little Hudson in our world now, my goodness, if that's not a reflection to teach someone to be a good human. This little kid walks along the street on Holland Road here in Singapore. He waves at every bus driver. Why? Because that's what I do. I teach him, be a good human. You never know what that means to the bus driver as he drives past. You never know what that means to a complete stranger. You never know what's happening in someone else's world. So why not just be a good human? So
Good on you.
hope that answers your question, Dom.
Absolutely.
Can't believe
mate.
that memory. I just remembered that. It's incredible. Very cool. Thank you for that.
It's why we love you so much, Andy. It's you're one of those easiest people to fall in love with, and we see that again and again.
My
and
wife
again.
says the same thing. Maybe not now, but maybe back then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With our clients, your coaches, everyone, your ability to build and develop that instant rapport with them, which allows you to be a great influencer. They say that leaders are influencers. And I want to thank you for sharing those powerful anecdotes with us. One of the things that we share in our journey is that the power of starting with why. The great Simon Sinek, he says, people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do. And I just glean from that, listening to you, and that you're always purpose-led, and what drives you is to make a difference. And yet, in times, it's very easy for us to choose the comfortable path and the right path. And very often the right path is all about growing without ever losing the sight of the why. So we speak about values, and clearly, you read all the textbooks about leadership, and I think we learn about this ourselves, and we talk to leaders about being values driven. Share with us, Andy, was that something you were innately born with, or did you learn? Can a person actually, is there a process for them to learn what their purpose is and what their core values are? Is there a purpose? What in your view? Or is it something that you were just born with? Day one, you were like that?
Yeah, great question. I think if I look at, and I made this mistake in the past, we try too hard to find purposeful or things of purpose extrinsically outside of us. We're too busy looking for the thing I should be doing. So, I arrived at that place of selling the business and trying to find something when in actual fact I found me. Because I look back, like I said, through life, at life leaving us clues. My reflection for anyone listening to this is to look back at life and see the clues, meaning that it's not a vocation, it's a way of life. Purpose is a way of living. To be a good human, that doesn't take anything that can be done in whatever role you're in, whatever position you currently hold. And there's purpose in that, in being consciously aware of what's happening for our teams, our people, noticing something that's a little off on a person and checking in with them, right? That's purpose right there. It's just that we maybe have to hang our hat, or we think we have to hang our hat on, if I just jump ship and do this vocation, be it a coach, be it a speaker, be it whatever it is that we choose, then we will be doing something purposeful. In actual fact, every day I spend with little Hudson, that's living purposefully right there. So I think purpose is one thing, and I think if we look at values, it's one of the most important things. If I'm driven by this, call it a primary question in every moment of, how do I choose to spend today? Being a good human. If that's my driving force, what allows me the ability, now caveat, easier said than done as a human being, we all make mistakes, but what allows me to live that as often as possible is to be clear on my values and always make a values-based decision. If we're left with those two paths of doing the right things and doing things right, we might be presented with an opportunity that goes against who we really are. Financially, it might be very motivating to do it, but we know that by swallowing that and taking the little old lady's money, $150, if we took that in that moment, we know there may be a point of regret. Why? Because you actually went against what's most important to you. My opinion, my advice when it's working with people, when you're clear on values, you know what drives you to be who you really are. It's not just understanding that, but it's also then setting boundaries up for it as well. Meaning, how do I live that? Appreciation is the most important thing to me in my world.
Right.
When I say appreciation, what I mean is this reciprocative appreciation. Having little Hudson and teaching him to appreciate others. When it reciprocates, it's a wonderful feeling, but it's not about that. I don't need external appreciation to feel that I'm living my best life, but I feel fantastic when I give of that to others, when I give them that opportunity. Authenticity is really important to me. What does that mean? It means I need to be authentic. I have moments of weakness, of course, human beings, but what it means is the people in my world, I demand authenticity. You know, I want to be surrounded by people who are being authentic. So that might mean that people around me are called to growth for that reason, or maybe they're not quite ready just now. And, you know, I've had people that maybe aren't in my world currently because, you know, we're aligned with our values. We live true to that. You know, maybe there's a mismatch. And we've got to be conscious of that, because if we choose that direction, people may leave our world, but more people will come in. That's always the way. So for me, it's when we're clear on it, we can always make that decision. We're presented with that job offer that says we can go in this direction. And we know by doing that, there's going to be a true lack of appreciation. It's really about money and money only. People are inauthentic. They're wearing a suit and a tie, but they're pretending to be someone they're not. And you're going to survive that environment for 5 years when this is what drives you to be who you are. That's going to be a problem. That's going to be a real issue. So you know it going into it. Trust and be consciously aware of what's most important to you, and always make a decision based on that. You can never go wrong. That's my opinion on that, Dom.
Wonderful. So listening to that inner voice.
Well, actually, that's a really good point. Inner voice being, call it intuition, whatever it is. That's what I believe is the guiding force of, you know, we have a voice of reason. We have a voice that, you know, maybe says we can't do it. We're all normal human beings, you know, having a human experience and having those, you know, those inner voices that happen. But time and time again, those intuitive thoughts, be that small things where I know I should have done that, I walked away and didn't, and sure enough, I should have trusted myself to do it. Be that big decisions, small decisions. To me, that's our values calling. It's just in the form of a voice in intuition that said, this is the path I should take. Wow. So you come back to your question about choosing the difficult path. The path you know is going to be difficult, but when it's chosen with values, you know, it's almost going back to my metaphor of motocross. It's going to be fun. It's going to be tough. There's going to be growth in it. You know that, you know, this is what makes life worth living. This is what makes it purposeful.
Absolutely amazing. Such a gift to know what your true north is, you know, your compass. And I say that I think when you say live authentically and listening to that inner voice, you're listening to that inner compass, your core values. I think for someone who's in our audience who's listening to this and saying, I would love to find what my true north is, what guidance might you give them, Andy? Is there a process? Are there a set of steps? Apart from being a good human, because I think everyone has a definition of what being good human is. Good human is, I want to provide for my family. Good human is, show up to work each and every day, do what I'm told, right? And so how does one find their compass, their true north?
That's a great question. I do things a little backwards. Maybe that's what you talk about with the difficult path. I think I've always done, I've done things the other way around. And through that, I discovered something. This is something I often help clients with when it comes to coaching and understanding values. Often we get caught up in the warm and fuzzies of what makes us shine. Meaning, this is really important to me, I know, because it makes me feel good. I like to look at it from the other way around. What things piss me off? And when I look at what annoys me, what frustrates me, what really pisses me off, what I know is that this is going against who I really am. The resistance I'm feeling is actually, if we call it an example of, you know, maybe being around someone that you feel is not being their true self. What is it about this person that's pissing me off right now? Actually, the lack of the lack of them being authentic. Them being inauthentic is a resistance to me. Why is that? Well, it's actually because authenticity is really important to me. So if I look at flipping it around, and you know what I would say to people listening is, maybe write down the list of things that piss you off,
Great.
the things that really annoy you.
Wow.
And in that lies the insights of why it ticks you off. What is it about you that when you allow this into your world, it's almost like you allow your boundaries to be crossed. That's the bit that's really frustrating because we allowed it, right? But if we're clear on our values, we know what's really important to us, we tend to be able to advocate for ourselves, speak up, and maybe in that moment send the trajectory on a different path. So I figure it, if we look at it from the other way around, also appreciating the things that are really important to us, but to understand what's the resistance, what pisses us off, what makes us frustrated. And if we look in those experiences, we'll probably find the contrast of what's really important to us that's not existing. Take someone that's maybe in a job right now that's not enjoying themselves. You've got a manager, a boss, or someone that, that's really annoying them. Every day they're dragging their feet, the countdowns on to Friday, that type of stuff. That's beautiful to look at and observe and understand. What is it about this that's making me drag my feet every day? Where's that resistance coming from? Because then you'll understand the insights. And when you have clarity on that, it becomes very simple. When I say simple, I don't mean easy. The path might be challenging. It becomes very simple to actually make a decision based on what's most important to you. So that would be my advice. Look at it the other way around. People Google search, values, and you get the warm and fuzzy words. And the problem is we look to the opportunity rather than the contrast to that. There's always two sides to the coin.
Yeah. Can't help but think of this wonderful quote, "A life not examined is not a life worth living," something like that. So it sounds like a journey of discovery. I think as you share and account and share your journey about in fact, the powerful question think about things that piss you off. I get back to the time when I learned about my core values, and they were both sides, as you say, the opportunity as well as what I call the towards values and the away values. What are the attributes of people that when you see them in action, it really resonates with you. For instance, just listening to you, wow, someone that really inspires me, someone who's driven by contribution, someone who's driven by growth, someone who exemplifies courage, someone who exemplifies being a good person in the eyes of others. And those are the things that I feel resonates with me, and those would be values that I think we share in common. But I think having that discovery of that was super helpful. But also you reminded us of what are the things that pisses you off, right? The away values. What are the things that when you're behaving like that, or when you see someone else behaving like that, it really doesn't feel right. And not to be that. I think that's such an awesome guide. Awesome guide.
And it's a good point too, Dom, in that the thing that probably annoys us the most is the fact we didn't speak up. And we didn't speak up because we weren't clear on our values. So if we look at those moments where perhaps you didn't advocate for someone and you went home and you thought, why didn't I speak up? That's where the gift lies. It's not about the speaking up. It's about the insight you just took away from that, to know that next time you will, because now you're clear why you're speaking up.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. I think just through the wonderful anecdotes that you shared all throughout today, so many things you can share, in your journey about sales, the business that you got, and it was just from your core values, doing what's right, whether that's service excellence, people feeling great about that. And very often people attend training on service excellence and sales, and they want to learn about techniques and strategies and methodologies and what do I say. And you reminded us that the real gift, the secret sauce, if you like, of people who are exceptional is what's, what we call under the waterline of the iceberg, your core values and what shapes you, right? Knowing who you are and why you do what you do. And then, as you say, sounds simple but not easy. The real challenge for a leader is to have the courage to live true to that in moments when it's tempting to take a blind eye or compromise on that. And but I think it's true that makes people always know where Andy will stand. I think we've worked together for close to 6 years now. It's been an honor and a privilege. And yet, with Sue and I, whenever we talk about the work that we do and certain situations, we kind of almost know in our heart what Andy will say and how he'll respond. Because you've just been unwavering to your core values, especially when times have been tough. And so I was just reminded of the last workshop that we ran. I think you ran for one of our amazing clients here, and you came back and you said yes. And I think you hadn't done maybe a 2-day workship in person.
It's 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I was like, well, does Andy need a little bit of a, slipping through it and warming up? And you were like, you can count on me. And I was like, zero, absolute, 100% confident. If Andy says yes, it's going to be a no-brainer. He will smash it out of the park. And you did, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was the duck.
That was the duck?
Yeah, floating on the surface, but the legs were kicking. Yeah. If you think about that, right, the intuition is the bit that says yes. The voice after is the bit that says, hang on a minute, you haven't 2.5 years. You probably want to even, the self-doubt of, maybe, just refreshing, maybe a bit of mirror work, that type of stuff, and in the end, I had no time to do any of that and just stood up in front of those people. And you want to talk about values, you want to talk about, being a good human, you want to talk about, all of the things that we've discussed in this conversation. That's the bit that allows you to get up there and just talk, right? Because you can never say the wrong thing if your intent is pure. You can never say or do the wrong thing if your intent is to serve. You might say something that takes you a little bit longer to get there. At the end of the day, the intent was to serve. It wasn't about me being at the front of the room. Maybe I can honestly say once upon a time it probably was. Much younger days, being, this desire to be significant and be purposeful and find that. I think with, a level of maturity that you have as a human being, as you grow, you arrive at a point where you realize it's actually not about you. However, it's okay to enjoy the experience. I had a shitload of fun, Dom. That was amazing. It was a great time. And that's the cool part. If I'm having fun, they're going to feel it.
Absolutely.
That's the main thing. So just say yes and work it out.
Beautiful. And the feedback from that has been everyone had fun too, because you had fun. And it was amazing. Mate, just curious, you've been away for 2.5 years from Singapore, coming back. What have you appreciated most about being home in Singapore?
First is the food, right?
Tell me more.
Singapore is an amazing place, and it was a really challenging time during COVID, and that was an interesting time, and it was anywhere in the world. It was particularly challenging for me. And that wasn't about Singapore. That was about me. That was about values. Once again, just feeling all the limitations and things that happened, and being encroached upon. As far as the boundaries I have, and there was nothing I could do about it. And of course, that makes for an interesting time in Andrew Davey's life. I'm not going to lie. It was tough. So coming back post that, one of the most wonderful things, and I'll share a couple, but one of the most wonderful things has been reconnecting with so many people. And these are people that, we've come to know through the work we do. These are people that, clients I've kept in touch with, maybe virtually, and meeting up in person has been awesome. It's really, just that ability to appreciate these amazing human beings where they are. These are people that are authentic, people that, I just love having in my world, and now I'm reconnecting with them all. And the other thing too is I'm rediscovering Singapore through the eyes of a 2.5-year-old. My wife, as you know, Singaporean, born and bred here. She feels the same. We're like tourists in this place.
Wow.
There's so many wonderful things for him to see. There's over 200 playgrounds in this place. It's
really?
Amazing. We've seen 97 of them.
Wow. There you go.
There's so many things. I'm big on exploration, and I'm big on not over planning. That's probably one of the things that's always, you have something in place with loose guidelines. My wife's pretty good at planning, so that's where we complement each other well. I was in, for those that have listening in that haven't been here, you've got to go to Gardens by the Bay, right? It's such an amazing place.
It is.
So I took little Hudson to Gardens by the Bay, and was supposed to go to the beach at East Coast Park. And there was a marathon running, which means we couldn't go to the beach. These are the moments in time where you just go, you know what? There's nothing I can do about that. You don't call off the plan. You've got a 2.5-year-old that needs to release some energy. So I just kept driving and somehow found myself at Gardens by the Bay. I said, you know what? This will do. Just trust, intuitively know, pull into the car park. Let's go have some fun. And I discovered a water park there that cost $0 and literally fountains and things popping up out of the water. He had the time of his life. I had the time of my life. It was wonderful. So little things like that, there's so much of it. There's so many places to explore. It's wonderful. The food is amazing. I think I've put on 5 kgs since we got back.
Really?
Not dissing the US in any way, but we all know very well there's something about the food here in Singapore that's just incredible. So I've relived all of those experiences of Ya Kun.
Ya Kun, okay.
Roti Prata. It was like day 1, Roti Prata day 2. It's just all of the things that I love. What I love too is that you come back to Singapore and it feels like you're plugged back into a world that didn't change. It's the same barista. It's the same people, running the cafe that I used to go to. They remembered me and we had this wonderful conversation. So, just in catching up with everyone it's been awesome. Not to mention the opportunity to stand in front of people doing what we love. Always grateful for the opportunities that you create and that we can create at EQ. Stepping up in front of that workshop for 2 days, just had a blast. Just a reminder, I spent a moment in time during those 2 days where I just stopped, reflected to appreciate how amazing this opportunity is right now.
Beautiful.
Which is a key point, Dom. There's the past, there's the future, and there's now. And now is really the only moment we have. And I think the past is full of regret and the future is full of fear of what if. But now there's just the emotion of appreciation. That's it. That's all that exists, is you and I having this conversation with some amazing people here.
Good idea, mate. Absolutely. Feel the same way. Similar, Sue and I arrived here in beautiful Changi Airport last night, and you say the place doesn't change, and that's true in general, and yet every time we come through that amazing immigration, and
that takes 38 seconds.
38 seconds, pop, automatic. The facial recognition is so super quick. I'm just investing more into NVIDIA, Andy.
Well done.
Just imagining the stuff that's driving these chips. Boy, it must be so quick. And the demand for that, the facial recognition. So it's a country that always seems to stay the same, and yet that never sleeps, if you like. Keeps growing, keeps innovating, keeps being even better. Always inspires us about the place. And yet some of the things that never change are, we were hungry, getting in here at about 10 p.m. last night and just checking the food court if it's still open. And thankfully, there were 3 stores still open. And the things that we still enjoy are the simple things like just a duck sauce noodle with fish balls and similar things like that. And reminded me of, people ask me, hey, Dom, what's going to be your last meal one day? If you had a choice of what's your last meal, it's usually for me anyway, it's the simple things in life. Andy, over the last 2.5 years, man, how old is Hudson now? 2?
2 years.
Just turned 2.
Yeah, 2.5.
Just love to learn a little bit more about your journey as parent. Andy, I know you're not first time parent. You're parent also to the amazing Kieran, who's now in his 20s.
24, yeah.
24, and but tell me, what's the last 2 years been? What's the biggest lessons you've learned in your journey with Hudson?
Hudson's such a wonderful reflection. The kids, anyone who has kids knows this, right? They hold the mirror up in every moment. Our journey to Hudson's probably the most interesting one, of having to let go and focus on now. Ironically, just sharing that before. Hudson was a result of IVF. And that was a decision that we made. That was actually during pandemic. We had a really interesting situation because there's so many rules and things that were happening. we actually went through the IVF process in the US. So they have this, science sometimes just amazes me. It's like, and especially in this field, it's like, I feel like playing God in a way, in the way in which they can do things with science, right? So we did this thing called PGS testing, right? So that's where they take I'm going to get all scientific now as best as I can. They take the egg and the good stuff and they make a fertilized egg, right? An embryo. And they freeze them at a certain point in the evolution and they do testing to see the most viable candidate, the one that's got the highest chance and probability of survival. Interestingly, it's not allowed here in Singapore, which would mean they have clinics in Johor, JB, across the border, and you could send them there to get tested. And the worry was during the pandemic, they might not be able to come back. Or if we went with special remission, we might get stuck and not be able to come back. There was too many uncertainties and variables. So we had this chance encounter with somebody that said, you should actually talk to this doctor in Orange County. We had no thought of even going to the US at all. And, we said, what have we got to lose? We'd experienced 2 miscarriages, which was, if I talk about, grief and loss, I'd never experienced grief and loss until those moments. So we made a decision. My wife and I had a conversation. We said, you know what, if it's meant to be, it'll be. Let's give it one shot and see what happens. If it's meant to be, it will be, right? And we had this conversation. I still remember it. The guy was in Orange County, Dr. Richard Lin. This guy's known, imagine this is your tagline. He's known for getting every woman he meets pregnant. Pretty impressive. Imagine that on your business card.
That's awesome.
We spoke to him, very high I, in disc, and just very likable guy. And we hopped off that call. We looked at each other and said, you know what, let's go for it. Not a cheap process, as you can imagine. We flew out in 2021 that was. And we arrived and went through the experience. And we thought, you know what, worst case, we'll have a good holiday. Best case, something will happen. Now, here's the interesting part, Dom. We started with 20 viable embryos. And after that, we ended up with 10. 10 of them didn't survive. They do PGS testing, and then of that, 2 more didn't survive, but we had 8. And of those 8, they tested to the point to see the most viable candidates, normally plural. We were left with 1. One is little Hudson that you see with us today. If it's meant to be, it will be, right? Those moments of decision, destiny shaped, right? Wow. We made that decision. We looked at each other. We didn't overthink it, about the money or anything. It's like, you know what? Yes, let's just go for it. Worst case, we can have a holiday. Best case, something magical happens. I guess that reminds me of Einstein's quote. You can live life as if nothing is a miracle or as if everything is a miracle. Wow. You can be wowed by everything you see, or you can be frustrated because it's not the way it should be. And I think the moment of now, there's so much magic to see. If that's not magic at work,
thank you. Yeah.
I don't know what is. So to answer your question really quickly about Hudson, he's just a wonderful gift. He's such a blessing in that, I don't feel, for me as an individual, for us as a couple, the level of growth we will experience would have happened without him in our world. You're a father. I think you understand exactly what I mean by that. The growth, the challenge, the everything that goes with it is, you wouldn't change a thing about it.
Beautiful.
Hope
I think Sue and I, absolutely. And Sue and I often, think and feel such great joy and gratitude for Hudson, just having the most amazing parents in you and Ginny. I know that the audience listening to this conversation can only imagine what being your child is like. A life full of adventure, life filled with fulfillment and gratitude and, positivity about the world, and such a great role model. So absolutely fantastic. As they always say, as a leader, it's not what you say, it's what you do that matters. And it's the biggest gift you can give your child. And thank you so much for sharing that, Andy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to pick on that interesting anecdote that you shared about Dr. Lin and his tagline.
Yeah. Of course you do.
What would the tagline on Andy's business card say?
It would say, be a good human.
Really?
That's it.
That
really
is so
simple.
Beautiful.
it's something, and that's a key point. If everything and anything shows up in my world, that's really, I don't sit there and analyze and how do I make a values-based decision in this moment. What would being a good human do in this moment?
Powerful question.
I was at the gym the other day. Ironically, it's another gym story, right? It doesn't show. I was at the gym the other day and I went to put one of the weights back, and the trainers are amazing there. You know, this trainer in particular, she's super bubbly, everything. And she drinks a Monster Energy in the morning, right? And I lifted the weight up and boom, I put it down like a Neanderthal, obviously because the weight was too heavy more than anything. And I knocked this Monster Energy drink like everywhere, like, oh, idiots, like 6:15 in the morning. So I quickly get my towel and I wipe it up. And the first thing I do is I go buy her another one. Why? Because that's what a good human would do. It's very simple actions. It doesn't have to be big things. And although big things will present themselves, it's just our every little action that matters. You know, if we look at leaders listening to this, you know, one of the things that I always say, you know, is just caring for your people. Just checking in. If you notice something off, ask the question. Simple. Just ask, hey, is everything okay? I just noticed this. And I think the problem is sometimes we get this disconnect where, you know, there's hierarchy and all of these things. If we get rid of the hierarchy, how do we do that? By being vulnerable. You know, and a leader just needs to be vulnerable. You know, we worry about showing too much of ourselves to the world. We had a conversation about this morning. The work we do puts ourselves out on the skinny branches, right? It's being vulnerable. You want to live a purposeful life, a purpose-led life, true to values, and, you know, and whatever drives you, be that primary question or statement, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be people that will test you on it, you know, that'll push against those guardrails. But it's just constantly reminding yourself of that, you know. So I'd say that's probably the best answer I can give on that, mate. That's
Thank you.
That's my insight.
Thank you. Thanks for inspiring us, Andy.
I hope so.
It's not what you say, it's what you do. And just as importantly, it's the impact you have on people's lives. I want you to know that it's a blessing to have a good, amazing human being in our lives. It is why we love you. And it's why we know that the people that you get to serve are incredibly blessed. And this is not just your clients, but everyone that is in your wake. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your wisdom and giving us your time, allowing me to brush up on my skills on doing this. I'm absolutely determined to be even better. But thank you for journeying with us and for doing this with me. It's an honor that I do not take lightly.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for the opportunity. It's wonderful. I don't know what's in this for someone, and you just sincerely hope as a good human there's something. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy, for the amazing time that we had today. As they always say, I think it's not what you say, it's what you do that matters. And yet, what you do and the impact it has on others, I think that's what also matters. And I want you to know that I think in my last episode with the amazing Brent McAllister, it was fascinating because I think somehow we got into this discussion of what would you love to have inscribed on your tombstone? A little bit like the tagline question. And Brent was pretty amazing. I think he said that his wife, when he did that reflection many, many years ago, when a chance encounter with someone on the beach that he came across is similar to that wonderful mentor that kind of spent time with you back in the day, and someone had walked across Brent and his wonderful wife and asked the question, hey, I want you to imagine it's all done and what would you love to have inscribed in your tombstone? And they just enjoyed that process of chatting with each other that afternoon. And I think Brent's wife was like, she loved. It was beautiful. And Brent's was, he made a difference. That's what he came up with. And that's what drives him in everything that he does. I know that if you want to know how people think and how I feel about you today, I would authentically say he was an awesome human being and a brother.
Thank you.
Always felt great about yourself. He always reminded you to be true and authentic. And I thank you for that gift, Andy. And I know that that's a gift that you would leave to our audience here as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dom. Thank you to you too for all the opportunities you create. You know, being an inspiration to others, but you set the platform for people like me to do something purposefully. And you do that for so many as well. All the people we meet, these people in organizations, these leaders, you hear the difference in the turnaround story. I recall a story, if I may, of one leader here in Singapore, as you remember. This was a person that really wanted the best for his people, just like you're talking about with Brent, really wanted to make a difference. He just didn't know how to do it. Remember he brought that plate of donuts?
Yes. I know that
He
one.
brought that plate of donuts in. And I remember he said to us, I put the donuts out at the meeting and nobody took a donut, right? In that moment of realization for him, the self-awareness, which is so important, of something, simple act of kindness that he hadn't done for years, that of course everybody thought there was a string attached. And then coming in vulnerably and just sharing openly, you know what, in the last 5 years, I've been an asshole and I haven't been great to all of you. And, I realize my shortcomings and I want you to know from today, it's different. Today, everything changes. When he shared that, and continued with the donuts, they started to disappear from the plate. But most importantly, that ability for him not just to be vulnerable. Vulnerable was the behavior. It was the action as a result of actually really wanting to make a difference for his people, care for his people. So in that instance, it's a great example. We sometimes think, it's too late. I can't do it. They already think this. I think vulnerability is a trait that undoes so much. And, if we can, be authentic and show our true selves to the world, sure, some people will scratch their heads and think, where'd the other guy go? But they'll probably much prefer this one. And you have an opportunity now. Now, once again, is the opportunity to change the course of, your people's lives. And if we think of the work we do and all that you create and everything, we never know what this conversation leads to and who listens to this and takes one thing away from. It might be the thing that walks someone off a ledge. It might be the thing that turns around an entire organization because a person chose to make changes. And it might be the thing that really makes a difference to the families of the people, that maybe are listening to this as well. That's what I always think. I think in a workshop, if there's someone in here that takes what they've learned and goes home and inspires their children in some way, then my work is done here. I might not get that in a feedback form, but I don't need to, because in my heart, I know intent is pure, values aligned, share.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think there's a beautiful last message for our audience to be authentic, and that requires vulnerability and just be courageous and confident being you. Thank you for that wonderful message, Andy. I've had a lot of fun. And you rock.
Thank you, Dom. You rock too, mate.
Thanks, Chef.